The Legend of Zelda is perhaps one of a select few video games recognizable to general audiences. So much so, many may go so far as to call it mainstream. Cozy games, on the other hand, well, those are generally more the realm of indie devs and smaller studios who have a great aesthetic sensibility and who don't have the backing of larger companies, so they decide to make their games smaller, less focused on high fidelity and more focused on a great vibe. One might be led to believe that the two are mutually exclusive. There's no way a Zelda game could be considered cozy by anyone in their right mind. After all, not only is Zelda more mainstream than most cozy games, it's also strictly classified as an action-adventure game. You fight evil goblins and take on magical would-be usurpers. None of that is exactly cozy, right? Well, on the surface, you're absolutely right. A high fantasy game about a little ace-as-f elf boy who becomes the unlikely hero of time, the only being capable of saving Hyrule from would-be ne'er-do-wells, has no business being listed among the ranks of slow-paced, chilled-out titles like Coffee Talk, Animal Crossing, or Stardew Valley. However, when you actually play the games, there is a distinct coziness to them that no other fantasy action-adventure game can seem to replicate without being derivative of The Legend of Zelda. And that is what we will be exploring today. Now, I personally don't think there's any use defining what a cozy game is. For one, it feels gatekeepy, and it's antithetical to all of the ideals inherent to cozy games. But also, it's just such an ephemeral thing. Cozy games are cozy by virtue of being cozy. In short, if a game is cozy to you, then it's a cozy game. And before you go Googling the definition of cozy so you can correct me in the comments, I'll go ahead and do that right here. Something is cozy if it is snug, comfortable, and warm. Therefore, a game has to be all of those things, otherwise it's not a cozy game. Okay, so now that we got all of that off our chests, let's start actually having a productive discussion about this. There are many things that can't really be rigidly defined, and ultimately if I were to try, I would inevitably exclude certain things which I absolutely don't think should be excluded. Huh. That sounds kind of like gender. Food for thought. So instead, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to tell you that I think Zelda games are cozy. And I'll try to explain why I feel that way. I'll start by saying I don't think that's necessarily true for all Zelda games. After all, the franchise stretches back over almost 50 years, so of course there'll be a great deal of experimentation with the formula. So yes, you're right, that one Zelda game that you're thinking of isn't cozy. But let me make my case for some of the ones that are. Let's start with the feel, the vibe, if you will. Do Zelda games pass the vibe check? Well, for me, absolutely. While the concept of Zelda is that it's an action-adventure game, it's far closer in my mind to a puzzle game that has some action in it. When you ask people about their favorite or least favorite part of a Zelda game, most answers you'll get will be about the dungeons. Love them or hate them, they are core to the Zelda experience. Sure, you might get the odd person who talks about fishing minigames, but in general, Zelda games are known for their dungeons. In those dungeons, you use combat, but the combat in Zelda is more of a tool than the core mechanic. And we can see that in the fact that you gain new combat abilities as you progress the dungeons. The same as any puzzle game where you unlock different modifiers or tools that you can use to solve the puzzles that you're faced with solving. Plus, the extreme focus on exploration and discovery is absolutely fundamental to puzzle games. Many newer, more innovative puzzle games don't have you simply solving classic real-world puzzles, but on a computer. They have you solving the puzzle of a world and how it works. I think Cocoon is a great example of that. Sure, you're solving explicit puzzles like opening doors and things, but you're also, on a more macro level, solving the puzzle of how to navigate the world, and what all the different tools do, and how you can use the world to your advantage to solve those more classic puzzles. Okay, but why is it so important that Zelda's focused on puzzles? Well, puzzles and puzzle games have a lot of potential for being cozy. For one, you have the nostalgia that comes with puzzles. For many people, puzzles bring us back to childhood. Rainy days stuck inside with nothing to do, long boring car rides, or snow days. These are all great times for a puzzle, but they're also extremely cozy. They're slow-paced, calm, usually, I can't speak for your family car rides, and many times they include low-tech projects and time killers. Zelda, being puzzle-focused, gives it that same kind of feeling, at least to me. Now, it's not one-to-one, obviously playing a video game will never feel the same as solving a pen and paper puzzle or working through a marble maze, but it references the nostalgic feeling that is inherent with those more childhood activities. And that's another thing that I think a lot of cozy games use to their advantage: nostalgia. Whether it's nostalgia for childhood, or for a simpler time before technology, or just nostalgia for a time we didn't experience, so many cozy games set themselves in worlds steeped in nostalgia, and Zelda is no different. Modern Zelda gets a lot of its thematic elements from Studio Ghibli, and it wears them on its sleeve. Studio Ghibli, in turn, relies heavily on nostalgia, and a longing for a time long past. Now, whether or not you agree with the politics of Studio Ghibli movies, you can't deny that they have an incredible understanding of how to craft a cozy and insanely nostalgic world. And being heavily inspired by Ghibli, many of these Zelda games today are extremely reliant on nostalgia, and a hazy, rose-colored idea of the past. But even putting nostalgia aside, Zelda games have a very distinct style to them. And while that style differs from game to game, for the most part it falls more into the cutesy, cartoony side rather than the hyper-real side. There were a few games back in the Wii days which attempted a more grounded visual style, as was in vogue at the time, but even then they weren't exactly cawed visually. They still had a very distinct stylization. But that cutesy, cartoony aesthetic does go a long way to making Zelda games feel like they fit under the cozy game label. Though I do admittedly always feel a bit conflicted when I use the aesthetics of something to classify it. Sure, there are trends and generally they can be relied on, but there are plenty of games some people would consider cozy that very much don't fit that aesthetic. And that really is the problem with trying to define and codify what makes a cozy game. So much of it is just a feeling, and that feeling will be informed by so many different things for different people. For me, fall, warm winter cottages, and Halloween vibes are peak cozy, but for other people it might be a warm day at the beach, or camping with their family, or going to the community pool. And all of those things are informed not by the activity or the actual literal events, but by the people that you're with and the feeling of the moment. And that is something that I think the Zelda games do really well, specifically with their NPCs. So much of that feeling that you get from a game world is influenced by the NPCs, and for a lot of games they feel like an afterthought. But the Zelda games, in my opinion, have always had really great NPCs, and I think all of those fun and witty lines of dialogue help make the world of Zelda games feel like one of the coziest that I've ever experienced. My favorite, as of recent, is the world of Echoes of Wisdom. I've always loved top-down Zelda. The first game that I actually played was Link's Awakening on the Game Boy, only a couple of years ago, mind you, but ever since I played that, all I wanted was more. And even that far back, you get such a cozy feeling when playing that game. While the stakes are fairly high and the actual narrative takes you to some pretty existential places, the minute-to-minute gameplay is honestly really relaxed. And I think that goes for all the top-down Zelda games. There's something just inherently less serious about a little bundle of pixels walking around a fantasy world, and while I think games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom did a great job balancing the vibes with the graphics, I still think there is something unique about the lo-fi feeling of these older top-down Zelda games, which is something I think Echoes of Wisdom and the Link's Awakening remake captured really well in their incredibly unique, almost miniature-esque design language. While I think there is still an incredible value to pixel art, and I would love to see a top-down Zelda game make the move back to pixel art, I also think if they're staunchly against that, this new top-down standard will do fine. If I'm being honest, I'm finding myself running into some issues trying to justify why it is that I think Zelda is a cozy game. I think it is a lot more solid than just because I played it and I find it to be cozy, but but I'm not entirely certain why that is. As I've spent most of this video saying, I think there are a lot of valid reasons that I find it cozy. And I think we could analyze it to the moon and back, but it almost feels pointless, like I'm trying too hard to justify my feelings about this franchise. I can list off all the reasons that it might be considered cozy, and I could sit here and try to justify those choices to you. But I think ultimately, all that matters is that I enjoy playing it, and I get that warm feeling inside when I do. There really isn't much else to point to other than that I feel a certain way when I play it. And that's kind of a weird feeling to have, right? But I think that's one of the things that's unique about cozy games in general. They're one of the few game genres that kind of, in a way, defy explanation and logical thought. Any game that you play can be cozy if you feel that it is, and while there are certain hallmarks that we use to put games into boxes and justify them having the cozy label, ultimately all that does is limit who can play them, right? I mean, sure, Zelda games are cozy because they're lo-fi, they're cozy because they're nostalgic and chill and have lovable people in them and don't have overly complex narratives. But none of those things make it cozy. Those are all just things that are true about these games and happen to coincide with a game that I consider to be cozy. I guess it's kind of like the concept of cozy in general. It's more of a vibe than anything tangible. I started this video with a dictionary definition of cozy, and sure, that's what the English-speaking world agrees that the word means, but what about the feeling? How do we define a feeling? Well, I think games do a great job of that, and I think any medium that can make you feel a certain way has the ability to do that. I think it's one of those things that you just can't really rigidly define. You have to make someone feel it in order for them to understand it. Cozy games aren't cozy because the devs said they are, or because they hit an arbitrary list of attributes. They're cozy because people played them and felt a certain way. And to be clear, that takes a lot of skill from the developer. You don't simply pull a game out your butt and have it magically be a banger. No, you need to have a deep understanding of how the choices that you're making will affect the player and the final product. So obviously there are going to be actual real things that devs do in order to make sure that you feel the way that they want you to feel. And I don't want it to sound like I'm dismissing that, because I'm not. It takes really talented devs to pull that off. I just get really tired of trying to fit these games that I play into these little boxes, and I find for me it can get in the way of enjoying a game as much as I maybe could have if I had just experienced it instead of trying to analyze it so much. I don't know. I don't have much of a conclusion here. I wanted to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that Zelda games belong under the cozy umbrella. And perhaps a better YouTuber than I could have made that happen, but I almost feel that it's more valuable just to let the community decide what is and isn't a cozy game, and the individual player. And I'm sure there are plenty of you out there that will disagree with me, and that's totally cool. All I know is that when I play these games, I have a great time and I feel relaxed, and I wanted to justify that feeling. But maybe there's no justification. Maybe it's just a feeling, and maybe that's okay. Well, anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. It didn't exactly go where I had intended it to, but I hope you enjoyed either way. Let me know in the comments what thoughts you have about all this. Do you agree about Zelda? Do you agree about cozy games in general? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I do really appreciate it, and it all really helps me out a lot. Other than that though, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day, and as always, happy gaming.